Hi, this is Billy Brown. I'm a nature writer with Grid Magazine and with PhillyNature.org, and I'm standing here with a brown snake. In Philadelphia, you might not expect to find snakes everywhere in the city, but I'm going to tell you, you can find snakes almost everywhere in the city. Outside of like the real concrete canyons of Center City, you can find snakes in every railroad right-of-way, every cemetery, almost every neighborhood garden, backyards, vacant lots, big industrial lots, meadows, and all the natural spaces you might think of. But the most urban snakes that we have are a species called the brown snake, sometimes called Decay's snake, which is named after somebody named D-E-C-A-Y, not after like the decay of organic matter. But brown snakes are totally harmless. People get squeamish about snakes, I know. They get to be maybe 15 inches long. I'd say a foot long is a long brown snake. Usually not much thicker than your pinky. They are, like a lot of small things, they survive by staying out of sight. So they'll spend most of their time under objects, especially during the daytime. At night, maybe they might come out a little bit more and hunt for slugs and worms and snails and things like that. But most of the time, they're laying low, they're digesting their last meal, they're sleeping, they're avoiding getting eaten by any of the tons of things that eat them, whether that's raccoons or rats or cats or crows and even robins, birds you might not think of as eating snakes. When you're this small, a lot of things can eat you. A lot of times people will say to me, because they know I'm into reptiles and amphibians, they'll say something like, hey, I found baby garter snakes in my backyard. And most of the time, I think they're talking about these guys, which are brown snakes. They look a little bit like garter snakes. Garter snakes have usually a more greenish tint to them, a little bit more stripy looking, a little bit bolder checkering, and slightly bigger heads. But either way, both garter snakes and brown snakes are totally harmless. The way you find them is you look underneath objects in places like this garden. We are at the Summer Winter Garden in Powelton in West Philly, one of the Neighborhood Garden Trust protected gardens in our city. And we were looking under objects as part of the City Nature Challenge and found this brown snake. We're gonna put him back in a second. I'll say, if you are interested in brown snakes, you can get out there and just look under stuff. A little bit about their natural history, aside from what I said about eating soft things like worms and slugs and snails. They give birth to live babies, and so they'll mate in the spring. And then as you get into June especially, you'll find really fat brown snakes under objects, and what you're finding are the gravid or pregnant females. And then a little later, they give birth to their babies, which, as you can imagine, are tiny, like little matchstick-sized snakes. And so they're a lot of fun. If you're thinking about what you can do to help brown snakes in your neighborhood, one of the things you can do is avoid using insecticides. So this is where organic, or we'll even say under an IPM structure where you're trying to minimize your use of pesticides, that helps little critters like this that eat the things that you might be poisoning with your pesticides. Another thing to do is keep cats inside. I know I'm always saying keep cats inside, but one of the ways I got activated in that was a neighbor of mine popped out of her house with a beat up brown snake and said, hey, my cat killed 4 of these and this is one I was able to get before it died. What is it? To me, that didn't feel very good, right? Because I'm someone who loves the brown snakes. And so I'd say you can do things like keep your cat on a leash when you take your cat outside. You can even build a catio. Those are great ways to give your cat some outdoor time where it won't have the opportunity to kill lots of brown snakes. One way to learn more and contribute information about reptiles and amphibians in Philadelphia and indeed in Pennsylvania overall is to check out the Pennsylvania Amphibian and Reptile Survey, PARS. It is a state-sponsored citizen science project gathering data on reptile and amphibian biodiversity throughout Pennsylvania. You can contribute observations about what you find through that. You can also do that through iNaturalist. PARS pulls information from iNaturalist through a PARS project. If you're curious, just go to paherpsurvey.org and you can find out more about how all this stuff works. And in the meantime, get out there, look under some rocks and see what you can find. I have a couple little bits of advice before we wrap up about looking for little critters like this. Number one, you're gonna look under objects, right? It can be pieces of stone like we found this guy under, you'll see that in a sec, logs, bales of straw, but you always want to put the object down first and then release the critter. They'll be able to find their way back underneath, and you want to avoid like dropping a 40-pound rock on top of the tiny snake and smushing it, right? All right, now we're going to let the little guy go. This has been a production of naturphilly.org and Grid Magazine. Check out naturphilly.org to learn more about brown snakes and lots of other nature in Philadelphia. And if you like what you're seeing and want to support more content like that, please consider making a donation. And of course, subscribe to Grid Magazine and support environmental journalism right here in Philadelphia. Thanks.